Good evening. My name is Chris Voss, and I'm a senior director here at the Herzog Foundation, and it's my privilege to welcome you here this evening, and I want to thank everyone for coming out and making us part of your Thursday night. The Herzog Foundation's mission, as many of you know in this room, is to advance K through 12 Christian education across the country. But every few months, we host a speaker as part of our American Dream Speaker Series. We aim to bring impressive speakers who embody the American dream from all over the country right here to Smithville, Missouri, so that the community can hear from them. Tonight, we're super excited and honored to welcome Ryan Bethea and our guest of honor, Medal of Honor recipient, Master Sergeant Earl Plumley. Ryan will be leading our discussion tonight, and he's a creative storyteller who's best known for his hit #1 show, The Exorcist Files. Ryan is also a really valued partner of the Herzog Foundation, and he helps spread our mission across the country on his show. I will let Ryan and Earl come up to the stage now and let Ryan introduce our special guest, and then we will get started with our discussion. So thanks for coming, and let's give it up for our special guests.
Thank you.
All right, we on? Okay, awesome. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's an honor to be here with you. Actually, my first time ever in the state of Missouri and Kansas as well, so thank you. At any given moment, I'm not sure where I'm at. Chris has corrected me several times. He took us to the Golden Ox last night. We had a great steak dinner, so Kansas City strip steak, fantastic. I'm actually not going to do a lengthy introduction for Earl. One, because he's way too humble. He specifically requested that I don't do that, and that's something you'll learn as he speaks. You have to pry it out of him, and something I deeply appreciate for a man with such valorous actions and who's just a living hero, is the first person to just dismiss and demur any attention on it. I met Earl a year ago. We're actually collaborating on a new show to document unconventional warfare with the Green Berets, which is very cool, and I'm very excited. And we've struck up a great friendship, and it's my privilege to introduce to you Master Sergeant Retired Earl Plumley. Thank you so much for being here. Medal of Honor recipient.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm very honored. Thank you.
We got one more thing for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Sir?
Courage and attendance remains on your feet, please. Only veterans. Basic Medal of Honor. Attend cut. Present. Halt. Order. Halt. As you were. Be seated.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we brought some slides, as any good presentation should have, so hopefully this will be a full multimedia experience. Earl, I want to start off, because obviously we're going to get to that fateful day, and they're going to get the privilege of hearing your firsthand account of what happened. But in your military career, in your decades of service, you have forged many powerful and amazing relationships, bonds that just transcend different theaters of war, different time spans, et cetera. But you have one in particular relationship that has sort of stood the test of time.
Yes.
And this is Peter. Could you tell the audience about Peter?
Peter is a orphan that we took in, my wife and I. She wasn't totally convinced that we should. He had no other option. His mother was torn apart by eagles and eaten. And a lot of things about squirrels people don't know is that an orphan squirrel will oftentimes throw itself on the mercy of a human. So a squirrel ran and jumped onto me, and I didn't know what to do with it, and definitely couldn't kill it in a park in front of everybody. So we took it home, procured cat milk, and raised a squirrel, which now lives in our house, and my wife is super excited about it all the time.
So this is Peter. Can we get a round of applause for Peter, please? And Peter is in his teenage years, you were telling me.
So, yeah, Peter and I used to be like any child. When we first got him, he's attached to me at the hip. I had a little fanny pack, and he used to live in it. We would go around, walks around the neighborhood, and I would run my errands around town, and I would have this squirrel in a fanny pack because he had to have his milk every 45 minutes. And now he's really exploring what it means to be an adult, and he needs his space and wants me to leave him alone and not talk to him in front of his friends. But he still hits roadblocks and comes running back in the house and, Dad, help. So there's some neighborhood bully squirrels that pick on him, and I try to let him figure it out, but I'll intercede when I have to.
Okay. Now, before we leave odd pets, just one last thing. Squirrels are not your first dalliance with sort of unorthodox pets.
No, I don't know why. But, God gifts me interesting creatures, so I had the same kind of occurrence with a possum. So my family and I raised 3 possums, which my wife was less excited about the possums than the squirrel. So we're making headway, I guess, in her opinion. And then in Afghanistan, we had a hedgehog called Tohar that lived with my ODA.
Okay, all right. All preparation, I'm sure.
Yeah, we got for something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start a zoo, maybe. I don't know.
Well, obviously, one of the real privileges of getting to be with you tonight is that you get to share some of your experience. One thing I found when I was learning and we started working on the show together, you all were very gentle with me and you corrected me, and I say, no one wins a Medal of Honor. You receive one. And it's a tremendous honor, and obviously you are the first to say that there's many people who are deserving of an honor like this and have had a lot of valor in combat, and you just happen to be, in a weird way, in the right place in the right time, but you were able to make the most of that situation. So I thought it'd be a real privilege for everyone to hear kind of that take us back to that fateful day and tell us about the account.
So I was living on Fort Operating Base Gosney. Now Gosney was a Polish base that we were tenants on it. We didn't have anything to do with running it, or the interior or exterior security, and we weren't even working in the area outside of it. So Gosney would get indirect fire, not every day, but most days. And for some reason, the Taliban, I did not know, are very, very known for their schedule keeping, like the Swedes. That between 10 and about 1, we would get indirect fire. And, I don't know if you've ever been on an Army base when it gets shelled, but, the alarms go off for some reason, as if you didn't hear the cannon, shoot at you. And everybody goes to their bunkers, and you're stuck there until the EOD comes out, stares into the gaping crater where an artillery shell detonated, and they go that it's safe. So I've never been to EOD school. It must be very difficult because I could tell that it detonated from a mile away. They have to go look in the hole. But I stopped traveling around the camp because on the SF camp, I would take a coffee break and go watch TV or something. And the rest of the camp is like living in bunkers, for an hour or 2 out of the day. So my take that the Taliban was doing was it was harassment fires. They're going to fire these rounds at us. They're taxing us, 2 or 3 hours of slowing the camp down. But that's not what they were doing. What they were actually doing was they had infiltrated the camp with a workforce. So every time a cannon or a gun fired onto the camp, they would see where it was aiming and have a guy pace off where it landed, and they're building a shot card for our camp. And they're also reporting on the actions we're taking when we're under attack. So they had figured out which bunkers were absolutely full of people and which bunkers are empty. Every person that attacked our camp had a hand-drawn map of the camp that was kind of a work of art. I was actually really impressed that somewhere out in the mountains, not just once, but I think we found 30 of these little maps. 30 times somebody hand drew our camp in better detail than in my memory, because I was looking at it and I was like, oh, I didn't know there was a bathroom there. But so, the day of the attack comes, I was hanging out with a medic friend of mine, and we were lamenting the fact that we were both special forces, snipers, and being stuck doing, administrative tasks at a headquarters unit, because, a Green Beret sniper, if I was out there hunting down somebody, I'd find them, and the war would be over by Christmas. And, nobody goes to Special Forces selection to work in an office. So we were both bummed out. And as we're sitting there complaining that we can't get out to get in the fight, we were both thrown to the floor. I'm in his office, so there's bandages and medicine flies all over the place. And I get up, and my suspicion was that we'd been hit by a mortar round had landed in our building. But as I go outside, what was a stunningly beautiful day in Afghanistan. Afghanistan's actually really pretty. I was looking around as I come out, and the entire area has just got this heavy pall of dust hanging over the camp. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. And I turn around and look over my shoulder, and I see this, a 2,000-foot mushroom cloud billowing up into the air. And what they had done was taken a cement truck and filled it with 4,000 or 5,000 pounds of explosives and rammed it into the wall. And 15 fighters wearing suicide vests with brand new Chinese rifles and brand new Chinese armor-piercing incendiary ammunition have stormed through that breach. But I didn't know that yet. So we're looking at this mushroom cloud, and I start hearing a machine gun section doing talking guns. And talking guns is where if you have machine guns, they take turns firing so they don't overheat the gun, but you keep a very heavy amount of fire coming onto an objective. But these aren't 240s, these are PKMs, so these are Afghan guns. And I was like, I've never really heard that before. That's really kind of a disciplined thing that you would more associate with a U.S. unit. So I was, I could kind of hear that, and I was like, well, that sounds pretty serious. And then I started, hearing mortar fire and RPGs are crashing onto the camp, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be we're under attack. This is a significant attack. And luckily, I'm a lazy sniper because before I went into the med shed, I had all my gear for a change of command photo, and I didn't go put it up. And I was making our clerk for the company watch it out in front of the front building. So I ran over, got dressed, put my helmet on, I had my fanciest sniper rifle because we took a picture, and I wanted that to be the picture from Afghanistan. Not me with my clipboard checking crates before they leave the camp. And our mail clerk comes pulling up because he has been doing our mail run, and as he was driving back, every Taliban man with a rifle or a machine gun was shooting at him, and he was super pumped to not be involved in that situation anymore. So he comes screaming in this Toyota. He must have seen that I needed it because he left the keys in with the engine running and sprinted for a bunker. At that time, our buddy of mine, Nate Abkmeyer, he comes running out of the company headquarters. He's one of our S2 HUMIC guys, and he comes running up and he says, "I'm driving," and I'm like, "Of course you're driving. I'm a super cool sniper. I can't be driving. I've got to be riding a shotgun or sniper gun in this instance." So we hop in, we turn the stereo on, we got White Snake blazing, and he pops the clutch to take off, and we almost run over the intelligence sergeant for the AOB, another buddy of mine, Drew Busick, and he's on a four-wheeler. He's got an MP5 with a vest, and he's looking cool. And I remember I yell at him, like, "Drew, get off that four-wheeler. You're going to get shot to pieces. Get in here with us." So he runs over, opens the back door on the truck, and it is absolutely full of mail. So he opens it, mail pours out. He scoops it all over, gets in, and we charge off into battle. At the end of the story, everybody was pretty upset because we got all the mail shot up, lit on fire, and bloodied. So we weren't super popular in the company. But we take off, leave the SF camp, and we're kind of meandering down this main road. And the Taliban is like those weirdos in the black trucker back, and they're shooting, taking machine gun fire, and every now and then they're lobbing an RPG in it. So we're just kind of randomly fishtailing down the street so that we're the opposite side of the road of wherever the RPG lands. And as we're going down the street like that, I see my company warrant and then another medic pull up beside us on a four-wheeler, and we're spooling down this street, and there's indirect fire landing and stuff's on fire, and we look over at them, and they're like, "Are you going down there?" I'm like, "Yes, that's where we're going. You coming with us?" And they gave us a thumbs up, and we take off down the road. As we get down to the airfield, I got my sniper rifle. I don't know if I told you guys I was a sniper, but I see this whole airfield. I can see where these Taliban machine guns are just off the base, firing through the breach and supporting these assaulters that have come through. And I think, I'm going to get my rifle up here. I can dominate this airfield, and I'm going to go to work on this machine gun section. And my rifle is a monster, so I pulled over to the side of me, and I kick my door open, and I tell my driver, like, hey, pull in over to this corner, I'm going to get out. As we do that, my company warrant pulls past me, Mark Colbert, and they pull up in front of us, and they instantly just get hammered by small arms fire. It just pours all around them. I can see them both get hit. Matt Horde and Mark Colbert are on this four-wheeler. They both get hit, and they both hit the ground, and they're laying on the ground, and they're still getting hit on the ground. So I give up on. I'm not going to dismount. We have a problem to fix. We got guys down, and they're getting hammered on the ground. So we're going to pull our truck in between them and that fire, and we'll get out and get them out of that area, and then I'll fight from the truck. So as we pull around, I saw this incoming fire. I thought it was coming from off the camp because we'd gotten down there pretty quick. But as we pull into this little four-way intersection and make that turn to kind of block this fire, we pull into basically a school circle for my military guys, but it's a half-moon shape of about 15 Taliban fighters, and we pull right in the middle of it. And they were dressed as Afghan army, but fooled me for a second. I was like, why are they facing the wrong way? They should be facing that way. And they helped me figure it out. They all picked up their rifles and started firing into the truck. And I'm sitting there with my door open. They weren't very scared by the buttstock of my rifle. I guess they didn't know I was a sniper. I've been talking to the Army about a patch that will scare people. But anyway, I turn my rifle around, finally get it, as fast as I can, turn it out of this Toyota Tacoma. I don't know if you've ever been in a Toyota Tacoma, but they don't have roomy front seats. I get my rifle, present it to the nearest enemy. I pull the trigger, miss, and my rifle jams. I had the same reaction. I was bummed out. And I was like, I got all dressed up, and I'm going to get killed here, sitting in this seat with a jammed rifle. At that point, I remember very clearly. I was like, well, that's it for me. I hope Nate and Drew are quick thinkers, and they can figure something else out. I've been trained for years that when your rifle goes down, your pistol comes out. So I felt that rifle malfunction, transition to my pistol, and I thought the only thing I could really do is buy those guys in the truck a few seconds. So I pulled my pistol, and I just started advancing on the nearest group of about 3 fighters, and just started engaging them with my pistol and waiting for the lights to go out. Much to their consternation and my surprise, I kept getting hits, they kept missing, and it got to the point where I was right in the middle of them, and they couldn't shoot at me without shooting at each other. But I only had about 2 or 3 pistol rounds left and a jammed rifle, and I hadn't really made a big plan about living this long, so I didn't have a great idea what to do now. So I pulled out a hand grenade and I just threw it to the nearest fighter. Hand grenades are scary, especially if you're wearing a suicide vest. So they panicked a little bit, and everybody ran off, except for the guy I actually hit with the grenade. He just sat there and laid on it, picked up his rifle, and followed me back behind this little water tank, engaging me from a prone position. So I went back, and I'm doing locking my bolt to the rear, stripping my magazine, clearing out my brass, putting a fresh round in. Sent the bolt home and jumped back to my feet about the time that grenade detonated. Now, so most of you aren't impressed by that, but to me, this is the coolest part of the story, is I cleared a complex malfunction out of my rifle in 3 to 5 seconds, and that's guaranteed by the manufacturer of U.S. hand grenades. Because about the time I sent that bolt home, that grenade detonated, and just blew this guy, straight up in the air, and that doesn't happen. That's not a real thing. And I just remember looking at that, and I was like, nobody's ever going to believe that story. As I'm sitting there, I start hearing that snap thump of incoming fire, and I turn to my left, and there's a fighter. He's laid out on the airfield in a sling-supported prone position, just cool as a cucumber, driving him in. Either he had a bad zero or he's a little nervous, but for having a Chinese AK-47, he put a pretty good little group on the wall, about 3 inches low and 4 inches right of my head. I turned, dropped to a knee, held center on him, took the slack out of my trigger and broke the round, holding on the notch of his neck, and he was vaporized from this plane of existence, which doesn't normally happen either, and it scared me pretty good. So I remember jumping to my feet, trying to figure out what happened, and I was looking around for a Polish tank. I thought maybe a tank had come out and hit him with the main gun, because I'd never seen anybody just disappear before. But as I'm sitting there looking at the airfield, I'm realizing all the fire that's coming is all Taliban incoming, and he had I just shot a guy with a suicide vest, with a sniper rifle, and I did not a full jig, but I was like, yes, because every sniper on the planet has a bucket list. I want to shoot a suicide bomber in the vest and detonate it, and I have now completed a bucket list. I can die a happy man. But we're sitting there, and I'm at that corner. I can hear everybody behind me, screaming for a medic, saying, I'm hit, Drew's hit, Chief's hit. Everybody was hit, and they were all, telling me. So I couldn't go back around the corner to them because these guys are going to be right on top of us again. And I don't know where they went, but I figured they didn't plan on bringing me. So I'm going to stay engaged with these guys, and we'll fight it out a little bit. And then that'll slow them down wherever they're going, and then everybody's going to hear this battle, and they'll come and support me. So I walk down this little alley. I get about halfway down, and they hang muzzles from cover, and they start lighting me up. And I'm returning fire as best I can with a 15 power scope, at 10 feet, which is difficult. And I run out of ammo because I have a super cool $10,000 sniper rifle, and they don't have very big magazines, and they're not really great at CQB. So I'm looking at all these guys to my front. I know my pistol is mostly empty. So I figured the only way I'm getting out of this one is if I do a reload. So I dump my magazine, rip a mag up to stick it in the rifle. And as I'm doing that, right when I hit the release, this nearest fighter to me, screams out Akbar, throws his rifle down, and just starts sprinting toward me. Which in Afghanistan is cultural bad news. But unfortunately for him, I practiced reloading my rifle more than he practiced sprinting, because he got about halfway there. I locked the bolt home and pulled the trigger and detonated his suicide vest, which was bad for me, worse for him. But kind of TKO'd me and blew me into the lane there, and I remember trying to figure out why there was so much sand in my bed. And why everybody was screaming. And I was kind of coming to, and as I looked up, another fighter was walking down on me. And I remember he was super excited, had this big smile on his face, and he was just slowly, cracking rounds off. But he was holding his rifle down low and looking over it, so all his rounds were landing about 10, 14 inches short. And I pulled mine up to start hammering away at him. And folded him up, and he landed in a little crumpled pile. I jumped back to my feet and started engaging his buddies behind him, and my rifle went dry again. So this time I dump the magazine as I take off running, and I go around the corner and I crash into Drew Busick. Now, Drew Busick was in the back seat of that truck, sitting in all the mail, and while it's miraculous that as I stepped out and all them guys were shooting at me, they missed me, it's equally miraculous that somehow Drew was unable to dodge a single bullet. So every round that missed me hit him in that back seat. So he was in the back getting shot to pieces, and he couldn't get out of the way because he was sitting in all this mail. And he went over and he couldn't get the door open to get out. So he was trying to swim through that mail and follow me out the door. And a round actually came through the door frame and hit the safety wire on this TRD for the back seat child safety locks. So when he was sitting there shaking that door, it was a child safety lock shut. So he climbed out the other side finally and has run around, and that's where I came and crashed into him. And I was like, Drew, I know right where they're at. Let's go get them. And he says, okay. So we go back down this alley together. He's on the far left. I'm on the far right. We got cross coverage. And that's where I'm watching over to his front. He's watching over to my front, and we're moving down this little lane. And he's getting to that last fighter I shot, And I say, I tell him, like, Drew, don't go anywhere near the bodies. They're all wearing suicide vests. And, he kind of holds up. And I remember I could see him trying to, like, well, how do I get down this lane without stepping over this guy? And anyway, his vest went low order, which is explosives burn. But when explosives burn, it's pretty spectacular. And we call it a low order detonation. So it starts burning, and it's like a 20 or 30 foot blowtorch. And Drew must be afraid of fire or something, because he comes sprinting over to my side of the lane, and we both end up behind this generator panel. And we're taking fire, and this thing's burning like crazy. And I don't know if this guy's grenades are going off, but eventually they all had these belts, and they had about 20 hand grenades sewn onto these belts. And they would come running up to us. One guy would be shooting at us with his rifle, and another guy would just be ripping hand grenades off these belts and throwing them at us. But they were so excited about it, they're throwing them, and they're only throwing them, from this side of the wall to that side of the wall, and they're channeling Nolan Ryan, so it's hitting the wall behind me and Drew, and then bouncing back in the middle. So they're really grenading themselves as much as us. But Drew and I are trying to hide behind this generator panel. It's about the size of that table there, so it's almost big enough for one of us, but definitely not both of us. And as we're sitting there, I get hit in the chest right above my plates, and I remember looking down, and it's a hand grenade, and it's the worst kind because it don't have a pin in it. But a lot of people don't know. Even as a Green Beret, we're not authorized to use foreign grenades, so I didn't want to get in trouble, so I just gave it right back to him. And Drew and I, another grenade came back there, and Drew and I are kicking it, trying to get it out of there, and Drew grabbed me and he said, "We got to get out of here. They're going to kill us." So we take off running. We get a couple steps from our cover, and we both get blown down, and I'm all tangled up on top of him. Fight back to our feet, and we go back around that corner again, and we're sitting there, kind of like, well, that just happened, and I hear this old gruff voice, and he's like, "What are you boys doing?" And I turn around, and it's Chief Colbert. And the last time I'd seen him, he'd arced out, backwards, fell on his back, and he wasn't moving. But I guess that's just what you do if you get shot through the butt. Because as he was jumping off that four-wheeler, he took a round through the butt, and I always kid him all the time. He's got 5 buttholes, one from God and 4 from the Taliban. But he's shaking it off, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" I'm like, "Chief, we know right where they're at. Let's go get them." And he's like, "All right, let's go get them." You can't have a war story without a Navy SEAL. So we had a Navy SEAL in the camp. He's run all the way across the camp, Lieutenant Turnseed, and he stacks up with Drew, and Chief Colbert stacks behind me, and he's like, "All right, you ready?" And I was like, "Well, no, I got to reload." And I go, and I'm digging around my vest, and I look down, and I don't have any magazines left. They're all gone. I pull the one that's in my gun out, and it's got 1 bullet in it, which is not that bad because I have one in my chamber, so I have twice as much as one. I put it back in there, but I'm like, "Hey, Chief, I'm out of ammo. You got to take point." And he leans over. He's like, "What?" I'm like, I only got 1 bullet. You have to go first." And he's like, "Okay." I was like, "Don't worry, I'll cover you." And he's like, "Great." So Chief Colbert steps in front of me, and we start easing back down to that corner. And then behind me, I hear this younger voice. I call him a kid, but he was, a 25-year-old sergeant. And he's like, "Can I come with you guys?" I turn around, I see a sergeant from the 10th Mountain by the name of Mike Ollis. And he's got his rifle, 1 magazine, because he was in the MWR, and a set of Oakleys. And I was like, I'm going to tell this kid to get out of here, because he don't have any business being out here with 1 magazine and no gear. And I was like, well, that's bold talk from a guy that's got 1 bullet. So I tell him, I was like, "Hey, it's pretty bad, but come on if you want." And so we edge around that corner. And not that it's a calm day in Afghanistan at this point. The whole structure we're next to is on fire. It had like a 500-gallon aviation fuel tank that's burning, and that fuel is just running everywhere. There's still indirect fire coming all over the place. And the Poles have pushed in like 4 tanks, and they are just absolutely unloading out that breach, everything they've got. And I don't know if you've ever heard a tank shoots fairly loud, especially if you've got 4 of them just pouring it on. But nobody's shooting at me right now, so it seems like a pretty good deal. We get down to this next little apron, and there's bodies everywhere. There's not a whole body, but there's pieces all over the place. There's rifles laying everywhere. And Chief Colbert made a tragic error of turn around, and he said, "I think you guys got them all." And as soon as the words have left his mouth, this kid sits up from behind a box, bounce passes us 2 hand grenades, and then pulls the lanyard on his vest and detonates his vest. And at this point, I was, for some reason, extremely confident that I could not be killed. Everybody takes off running, and I was like, why are these grenades won't even hurt you. I just rode out like 30 of them. So I didn't even run. I just stayed next to the wall. And plus, I didn't see really where they went. So I was like, I don't know. If you don't know where they are, what's the point in running? And then I remember, as I'm sitting there, this grenade hits the wall and then rolls right over next to me. And I was like, well, crap. And I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll see what happens. Because it's probably right where that panel is. And then I was like, oh, crap. I don't have safety goggles on. Well, I don't want to get nothing in my eye. So I looked over at the wall. We have a saying, God takes care of drunks and fools, and I'm dual qualified. Because, man, that thing went off. Not that it hurt. It hurt everywhere, but I didn't get hit. So I shake it off, and now I hear a rifle fire behind me. I turn around. One of these fighters has jumped up. As we were coming down, he ran around this whole little block and has crashed into the back of us, and he's shooting Mike Allis, and he's shooting past me and Drew. Fire my last 2 rounds. Whether I hit him and detonate his vest, or whether he closed that distance and detonated his vest, don't know. But either way, his vest detonated about 6 inches from Mike Allis, which blew Mike Allis most of the distance down this little lane. At this point, my pistol's empty. I threw my 1 hand grenade. My rifle is now empty, and I had pulled my knife out. And I remember I was kind of jumping around in that alley with my knife out, and I could see Drew and Chief and the Navy SEAL have charged down this apron. And I took a couple steps toward them, and I was like, well, knife fighting guys in suicide vests, probably not how you get your pension. And somebody's got to take care of this kid. So I put my knife up, I ran over and grabbed him, and drug him back into this compound. It's all on fire, but it's not out in the open. And I get in there, and I'm trying to treat him, and he's a mess. And the whole time I'm treating him, I'm trying to keep my head on a swivel because I'm by myself, and there's insurgents everywhere. And as I'm doing it, I look over and I see this civilian contractor hiding behind a generator. And I said, hey, come here. And he's like, no. And I was like, okay, can you run a rifle? And he's like, yeah. I was like, here, take mine and watch my back for me. So he runs over. I slam that empty magazine back in and send the bolt home. And I was like, watch my back. And I stick him out in that doorway. And he posts up and hangs that empty rifle. I don't know where he went, but if he ever hears this story, he's probably going to have words. I go to work on Mike, and I get him stabilized as best I can, and with what I have, just my little first aid kit. But we're on base, and I can see the surgical tent, and I load him up in this little Kawasaki Mule, and I asked the contractor. I was like, hey, do you know where the hospital is? And he's like, yeah. I was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'll cover you, and you're going to drive out here. And he's like, no. Because I'm pointing out, and these tanks, they're just traversing back and forth, shooting everything, and there's rockets landing all over the airfield. And he's like, I'm not going out there. And I was like, don't worry, I'll cover you. And so I stack up with my empty rifle, and he gets in there, and I give him a countdown just to pump him up. And I was like, you ready? 1, 2, 3, let's go. And I step out in that apron, wave my hand like a little plastic soldier figure, and he drives out and gets Mike to the hospital. I bump into my incoming company commander because he's like, I'm not in charge yet, so he decided to come get in the fight. And so he runs up. I'm getting an AK off of this insurgent, and it's all shot up. I take the bolt out of it and go find another shot-up AK and put one together. And I'm grabbing all their mags, and as I'm sitting there, I'm shooting grenades out into town. And he's like, Earl, what's the plan? And I was like, I think we should go hit that house and take on that base of fire. And he looks out, and the Polish tanks are, driving up and just, shooting their main guns into the windows. And he's like, I think they got it. We'll go back to base. And so, my battle was over, and had a cup of coffee, and got a good night's sleep.
Wow. All right, Earl, this story there's miracle upon miracle in this story. One, though, I think it's important to mention, is that you didn't suffer any ruptured eardrums or permanent, you have some hearing loss, but you had grenades and suicide vests go off within 10 meters. Can you tell us why you were fortunate enough not to have
So, yeah. So as we were driving up, we're driving down that lane, I was like, who's got comms? And I was the only person that brought a radio. So I turned my radio on, and I had a system, SF, it's hearing protection, and it's also a radio mic. So, I was keying my radio up, and I was like, in this battle, somebody's going to get their radio on, so I'll have to monitor comms. And so I put my earbuds in, and was just waiting for somebody to talk on the radio. But if I hadn't, I would be yelling this story at you.
Now, Earl, you're very open. You're a man of faith. The phrase "dodged a bullet" does apply to you. This is just. It's hard not to see divine providence on this story, but you have a very cool anecdote about this story involving your mom and her prayer circle.
Yeah, so I don't remember if it was the day before the battle or 2 days, but it was close enough that everybody remembered. And it was actually Drew and Nate Abkemeyer. We're sitting outside we had a place where we smoked cigars, a little fire pit, and my mom called. And she's like, hey, I have a ladies' prayer circle at church. She's like, I'm putting your name in, but if you have any friends that want their name in the prayer circle, give me their names. And, I was sitting there with those guys. I'm like, hey, my mom wants to know if you want in the prayer circle. And, everybody's got an image to uphold. We're smoking cigars. Even if you don't like them, you act like you do. And the guy's like, I'm okay. Don't worry about me. And that was Nate. So, after the battle, there was about 320 rounds fired at me inside of a 10 to 12 meter distance, and everybody got hit but me. And Drew got hit a lot. Nate got shot up in the front seat, and it did not escape everyone's attention that maybe God was a little bit too hyper focused on me, and he could spread some of that attention around. So Nate got in front of me. He's like, "Hey, call your mama. And you tell her that she's going to pray for everybody or nobody, because we can't have no more battles like that."
You don't turn down the prayer circle, do you?
Don't turn down my mother's prayer circle.
And she's still doing the prayer circle, right?
My mom is still doing the prayer circle.
Okay.
And so she's like, I have to. There's no way that your guardian angel is even remotely able to keep up with you. So.
Earl, what was the lasting impact of this battle? Because in one sense, right, it's for a lot of folks, it becomes like this is just another terrible day and a kind of muddied time when it was really unclear what was going on. And so what is but you mentioned in telling this story in other times that there was a sort of shift that happened after this battle. And
so I always use this as because you get lost in the military of how are you important as an individual, and do your individual actions really matter on the battlefield? And so I always use this story that we went out there and we could have pulled back, we could have handled that situation different ways, but we went all in out there. None of us had not a single round left when that battle was over, and we stopped that assault force right there on the periphery of the camp, and the Taliban didn't think it was a great investment. They lost, I think, 68 soldiers that day. All the suicide. The suicide bomber, you're basically writing him off, or you should anyway. But they went through all the effort to get these truck bombs. We had 4 truck bombs hit the camp that day, and they killed 1 American and I believe 4 Polish soldiers. So they completely changed their strategic plan, and they abandoned complex attacks on U.S. installations because they just weren't getting the effect they wanted. And so I always like to use that story to, especially like a young rifleman, like you could be that one guy on the line, you could be the last one that's shooting the last guy that stops that advance. And we see that all the time in Ukraine, where you see, one guy making a stand, and it has these enormous effects on not just your little battle, but strategically across this whole war. One guy decides that that's as far as they're going, and that's as far as they got. And so I think that's important, especially in an enterprise just as profound as the DoD, that if you're doing your job as best you can, you could be the person that has this strategic level influence, and you don't know when that's going to be. So you always got to come with your best effort every time.
Now, Earl, I'm going to ask too that we could sanitize this story just slightly.
Okay.
That's forthcoming. We've talked about this, and for the benefit of everyone here, but you have joked that what you just shared is not the worst day.
Yeah. That is not. Well, I talk to a lot of schools, and kids are always asking me, like, they want, that they're very interested in that combat. But I'm not going to go into a third grade school and tell that story I just told. I wouldn't get invited back. But so kids are always asking me, "What's your worst day in combat?" And to me, I expected to have to kill the enemy, and I expected that my friends would be killed, and I understood that I could be killed or wounded. But my worst day in combat was we hit a house in Iraq, and me and a buddy of mine stack up, and we have a flashbang, it's a distraction device, but it's still it's a very powerful blast. And anyway, about 40 people lived in this compound, and the water had been shut off. So when I threw this thing in, I threw it into their bathroom. And in Iraq, they have a big bathtub that's mounted on the floor, and it has a hole in the end. And so there was a pile of human feces, about this tall, and that grenade ricocheted off the wall, and blew that stuff all over me. And so I was covered in hot feces. That was my worst day. and then afterwards, we go to get in the vehicles to leave, and I remember my platoon sergeant was like, "No." And so I had to ride in the detainee truck with the Al Qaeda guys.
So you dodged 350 rounds of
yeah,
that, but you couldn't.
But I would
dodge
rather
that.
get shot than be covered in hot poop again.
Oh, never know. We're going to go into Q&A in a couple minutes here, but Earl, I was remiss. I meant to ask too, could you, in the off chance for any of us who aren't fully familiar with the Medal of Honor and its history, et cetera, could you just give a little primer on the Medal of Honor and how it's awarded and some of those interesting facts you've shared?
Oh, yeah. So, the Medal of Honor was created in 1861, and we only had one award prior to that. So George Washington made the Purple Heart, and it was kind of the Purple Heart was given for multiple things. And so what they decided was there should be a battle or an award for being wounded in battle, which the Purple Heart became. But then how do we distinguish, above and beyond service, valorous service besides just showing up and participating? And so he created the Medal of Honor. And since Lincoln created it in 1861, there's been 3,500 recipients of the Medal of Honor. And of those, 70% of them will have received it posthumously. And currently we have 61 living recipients, only 14 from the Global War on Terror, so the remaining are Vietnam veterans. And leave anything cool out?
I mean, the whole thing is very cool. And yeah, I think on behalf of everyone too, just thank you for sharing that. That was just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Now we have a video we're going to show, but actually it was cool. We can show that at the end, I think, and we'll just go straight to some Q&A. And don't be shy. Earl actually has a lot of opinions, and I encourage you. This is an open forum, and please ask any questions to do with anything geopolitical, military, squirrels, possums.
Yep.
All is on the table.
Just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic.
First of all, sometimes thank you doesn't do it. Second, I'm sitting on the front row looking at your ring on your right hand flashing. Is there a story behind that? Is there significance to the ring?
So, I don't usually wear jewelry. When the Medal of Honor Society is a society of fraternal order, I guess, of recipients. And so the only way to get in is to live and get the Medal of Honor. So there's not a whole bunch of them in there. And so after I got my medal, I'd never met a Medal of Honor recipient before my ceremony.
You're my first.
The first actual Medal of Honor I ever saw was the one the president put on me. But they came over and gave me a ring and said I was in the Medal of Honor Society. And so when I do engagements, I try and wear it. And it's just the insignia. It's the ribbon, but not the medal, because we try not to put the medal anywhere else other than as itself. A pleasure.
Who presented you your Medal of Honor to you?
President Biden did. And it's actually kind of a fun story. They tell me, like, hey, you're going to receive a phone call from a high-level member of the U.S. government. And I was like, I've talked to lots of high-level. That's weird. I've never heard it put like that before, and they're like, hey, it's going to be in like 4 months. I was like, okay. And so they called me every week, and like, hey, there's going to be a call on this day, a high-level member of the federal government. I was like, I know. It's in the calendar and everything. And so this lady, Samantha Youngblood, and she calls over and over and over again, making sure I'm ready. And I'm starting to get annoyed. I'm a Green Beret. I can jump in behind enemy lines with a sniper rifle or money and do things covertly on behalf of my government. I promise you I'll take this phone call. And so anyway, I gave them my personal cell phone because I didn't want them to call my office and accidentally talk to somebody that worked for me, because they're all weird. So I go out, I've got my phone, I have a cup of coffee, and I light a cigar, and I'm just waiting for the phone to ring. And about 20 minutes before the phone call, lightning strikes the camp up there at JBLM. All the power went out, and the cell phone signal dropped to nothing. And I was like, So I jump in my truck, and I'm like, where am I going to get signal at? So I end up over at the Madigan Hospital, and I get 2 bars. And I was like, well, it's a phone call. That should be enough, And then I'm sitting there, and I'm all sweaty, so I start toweling off my face because I don't want them to see me sweaty. And then I was like, wait a minute, it's a phone call. Phone rings directly, down to the second. And it says, White House, U.S. government. And it goes straight to voicemail. With whatever was going on with the cell phone. I was like, dang it. And I was just imagining the disappointed dad looks that are going from the White House to the Pentagon to Fort Bragg. And I was like, I wonder how long it's going to take that to get to me. So I only had one play. I call him back. So I call him back, and it says, White House. And I was like, I just missed a call from this number. And they're like, what's your, I think you've been spoofed. And I was like, well, I was expecting one. And they're like, okay, what's your name and affiliation? And I was like, Master Sergeant Plumley, U.S. Army. And so they said, hold for the president. And he picked up on the first ring. So anyway, he didn't call me, I called him.
So thank you for your service. Appreciate it. It's a great story. So how have you been able to transition now after your service in the military? And what are you doing today? And where do you see, how has this experience impacted you to where you think God is leading you now?
That's more than one question. But so I actually had a very unique experience. So I deployed immediately after my ceremony. I finished my operational time as a Green Beret. I took my team to the southern Philippines. So in that aspect, it didn't really affect me at all. The men I'd served with were still, some of them were from that battle. I didn't really see a big change in how I was treated until new guys started coming into the unit. And if you had never deployed with me before, it was different. I became this like person that was bigger than life, and they couldn't believe they're in a room with them, which they were really trying hard to get me killed because they just assumed I was an expert in everything. And I was like, no, I was brave one time. I have no idea how this remote firing device works. I will kill us all, man. If I'm not supposed to pick it up, say something. And then another reason, I was very lucky. I got it late in my career, so I was already about to retire. I actually stayed in longer because I just didn't like the optic of somebody getting the Medal of Honor and then instantly leaving the service. So I just didn't like the idea of as soon as you had something better to do, you would get out of the Army. So I actually stayed in a little bit longer, worked for the Army, doing recruiting and retention and standing in corners and looking dashing in my uniform with my medal on. And I transitioned, it was a lot easier for me. I was medically discharged. I had injuries that added up over the years. I just couldn't serve anymore. So, that was a really kind of a firm line where like this part of your life is over and now start this next part. And I still do the same things I like doing for the Army in the first place. I love talking to people who are thinking of serving and people who are not thinking of serving. I like to tell them why it's valuable and how I found my own purpose by doing it. And then helping people that are serving and not having the best, most wonderful time in the world. And I encourage them to take different paths in the military to find that purpose that's meaningful for you, because it is there. Just because you're mopping floors as a private, that's not the whole career. And obviously, Ryan and I are working on trying to put a documentary of sorts together, and I do engagements, and I'm also a rocket launcher salesman for Saab, so that keeps me busy also. But I'm just kind of poking around and staying busy, and trying to keep that purpose.
Earl, we at dinner, and this is what I didn't realize about you, is you have some really cool takes, which now looking back, I realize this should be totally expected, but on the current geopolitical climate, I do think it's really interesting, and maybe everyone here might find it interesting, but could you give us maybe just kind of Earl's high-level survey from having, and you make the joke that your uniform, you get accused of being a Halloween costume because you have so much insignia from Marines, Green Berets, Special Forces, people don't think it's real, right? And so you've got a very unique perspective. Could you kind of walk us through maybe how you feel about the legacy in Afghanistan, since you spent so much time there, and then where we're at maybe with the Ukraine, Russia, China situation from a military perspective?
So I'll start with Afghanistan. Everybody that worked there, I knew that Afghanistan was going to fall apart as soon as we left. I was under no illusion that the things that were being reported in the news were in any way accurate. Your average Afghan does not even remotely think of himself as Afghani. It's a family, tribe, and then religious sect are much more meaningful. And my Afghans that work for me really would get bummed out when we would win, because they looked at the Taliban as holy warriors. They weren't getting paid. They were very devout Muslims, and they really struggled with killing them, because they were the epitome of being a very devout Muslim. And I was like, that is going to be a problem. So I was under no illusion that was ever going to be successful. Everyone that deployed there, if they ever tell you, we did a study, and I actually got to talk to President Trump about it, and he's like, yeah, we did a study. It would take us 6 generations before Afghanistan would ever look remotely like something a Western democracy could realistically understand. It would take 6 generations before you could even possibly go to Afghanistan and not be under a severe threat of just being killed for being an infidel. So if we're not going to stay for 6 generations, it doesn't matter if we leave today, it doesn't matter if we leave in 10 years. The choice is the same. And so he's like, I pick today. And if they don't behave, we'll go back and do it again. The thing that frustrated me was just the way we left. I think we should have left it in a strong manner so it was very clear on the world stage, we're not getting chased out of here, we're just done with this. And I think that would have been just such an easier thing for the American people to tolerate, and the message it sent to the world that we didn't run away. We gave them a chance at democracy, and they didn't want it. The Afghans voted with their willingness to participate on the battlefield. There was more Afghans at the airport trying to leave than there were Taliban fighters in the entirety of the country. So if everybody at the airport had picked up a rock and went and thrown it at the Taliban, they'd have had their country back. They didn't want it. So I take a stern line with them, but it's just one of those reminders. When we go over and do these foreign engagements, we went in for a purpose. We went in there to kill Osama bin Laden. The day that Osama bin Laden woke up dead, the Afghans should have been wondering where the Americans were at. And I think that's an important distinction. We get caught up in doing good, and if we're not going to mean it, we can't stay. And that's my take. And then Ukraine is another one I'm fairly read in on, and I think a lot of people don't understand what the actual conflict out there is about, because we're so excited about picking out who's the bad guys and the good guys, and which political party thinks those good guys and bad guys are. At the heart of it, Russia is having a societal collapse. The reason this war happened, we knew this was the last year that Putin was going to have enough soldiers at a draftable age that he could even possibly do military intervention. He won't be able to use military force in 4 years. It won't even remotely be an option. And the threat that they're fighting for is that after the Soviet Empire collapsed, they have not replaced their engineers. So the last of their engineers are hitting their life expectancy in the next 2 years. So we're looking at a complete collapse of Russian infrastructure. And not that Russia's known for infrastructure, but I'm not talking about the roads and bridges are falling apart. We're talking about the electricity goes out and never comes back on. Bridges fall apart and trade becomes impossible. These cities are going to fall apart and people are going to have to move out of them. And so the only way in Putin's mind that he can save his country and his people, and even keeping Russia as a country that exists into the future, is he has to win and take back these areas like Ukraine, Lithuania, Slovenia. That's where all the heavy manufacturing, so he needs the industry back, and he needs those people, he needs that workforce back. So when we're negotiating with him, I think the mistake that the left makes constantly is like, well, he's going to give up soon. He's not going to give up, because in his mind, whether he's right or wrong, his perception is that he is fighting and waging a war for the very existence and continuation of his country into the future. So what does that mean? That means nukes are on the table. That means that if we're going to intervene militarily in Ukraine, going and stopping him from taking Ukraine is not going to work. Like if we're going to militarily intervene, we have to go in and completely destroy Russia. That's what the win looks like. So if we're not going to do that, and we're not willing to nuke Moscow, then what are we willing to do? Now, I like Ukrainian people. I hope that this works out for them. I think, if you have a democracy and you're willing to fight for it, stark difference between the Ukrainians, overwhelming odds they held the Russians back. So I want to support them, but not with my son. And it's the heart of the problem is that every member of NATO is complicit in that war starting. So every European country has not met their treaty obligations for the past, it's not this year or last year, for 20 years they haven't met their treaty obligations. So they completely eliminated having a military deterrence. They completely relied on us. And then at the same time that they were not meeting their treaty obligations, they shifted all of their energy reliance to Russia and not the United States. I don't know if you guys remember Trump's first term. He offered them an energy deal. They declined it and went with Russia. So when you have allies that have no military deterrence other than ours, have ruined their economies, why are we there? So I don't know if you've noticed, as we've threatened to leave, suddenly they all found money. They're doing military spending. Germany is actually diversifying their energy infrastructure and getting out of it. But the entire war, they've been howling for our money to prop up Ukraine. Then they've been sending a little bit more than we've been donating to Russia with their energy purchases. So to me, that place is a titanic mess. And when we go into a situation like that, if we don't know what a win is, we just end up like Afghanistan, where we're slugging around, $100 billion short. The dead keep stacking up, whether you care if Russians die or not. Somebody's mother does. So, what is the win? And if you can't define it, stay home. Please.
Yeah, I look at things from an economic standpoint. Your military guy, you say nuke Moscow. How is Reagan beat him economically? Do you think that's possible with the current Russia? It's not as
So,
just out of curiosity.
I mean, we are beating them economically. Russia doesn't, Russia is. So again, what do you mean by destroy? So are you going to, the Russian people are there, and they're incredibly resilient, and they're about as stubborn as anybody you can find in West Virginia. So if you tell them to do it, and they don't want to, they'll not do it just so they don't have to do what you said. And they want the same things that we want. So they want security for their country, they want trade for their country. And really what, in my opinion, I think what Russia's incredibly scared of is almost certainly in the next 7 years or so, there's going to be a war between the United States and China. What happens to them? Because they are a sideshow in that war, almost certainly. So if they are not strong enough to pick sides or be asked to be on a side, that means they're just going to be collateral damage for a war between us and China. So I think he is trying to ensure the survival of his country, and he needs certain things to do that. And if we're going to stand in the way, we have to understand what something is uncomfortable for us from a security standpoint or an economic standpoint. It's uncomfortable for them because it's ensuring the demise of their country as they've known it. So you got to understand we're fighting for sport and they're fighting for their life.
Earl, I know we got to wrap up, but could you maybe also end us on a hopeful note too? And you mentioned obviously no one wants war. We don't want a war with China. You've been outspoken though about how they are, while we're dependent on each other, we're rivals. Could you maybe leave us with just like an upbeat note about, there's a lot of doom and gloom, like the U.S., it's over, like China is basically beating us with manufacturing capacity, and they're ascendant and we're descendant. Could you shared with me some notes for how it's like, hey, we're still pretty badass, and there's a lot of reasons to be confident in the U.S.
Yeah, so I think for two reasons. Militarily, China cannot win a war. That's why they don't use military force. That's why anytime it comes up, they back right away from it, because we can't invade China, but they can't even keep us from locking their country down and blockading it. So with a war with China, they have mass starvation in about 6 months. So we run out of smart bombs on day 2, cool, but we bottle up the Chinese. 70% of their food comes to the Malacca Straits. 6 months after that war starts, and I'm not talking about people are missing meals. That starts the first day. But mass starvation, like Ethiopia or Somalia, where people are just dropping dead willy-nilly, at 6 months, the nation of China actually starts to, more people are dying from starvation than can possibly die in a war. So they got 6 months to reach any kind of military goals that they can't get. So that's not that big a deal. And they have an incredible manufacturing capability. They still have never mastered how to the ingenuity and create. So we're still the masters of that. And I think the big one is Trump is solving a lot of the problems that when people say we're a power in decline. Well, yeah, we're spreading our money all over the entire world for no useful purpose. I mean, the people we're giving the money to, they're not even nice to us in public. It's one thing if they're like, hey, we're friends, right? And he's like, well, as long as you pay the bills. We're paying the bills, and they don't. They're like bad mouthing us and degenerating our country. I'm like, what deal is this? So if we get that money back and get our debt under control, the country's fine. And I'm out here in these schools all the time. There's been a really interesting resurgence in patriotism and interest in what it means to be a citizen. And there's a really great group of young people in between like 6th grade and they're in the 12 in high school right now. They're just the opposite of the people ahead of them. And I could see what, in my opinion, happened is, everything America did is not great. We've got some blights on our history, slavery being one of them, and segregation laws and the civil rights movement. Not everybody in America picked the right sides of those. And so you had a whole sect of academia that just wanted to focus on those, so everybody knew that we did something bad. But they were so focused on what we did bad that they forgot to tell the kids about anything great about the country. And so even these teachers and these professors, they're shocked at how the people they've been teaching don't care about the country or want anything to do with it. And I'm like, yeah, you forgot to tell them all the good stuff. You added the 10% of bad things, and you forgot the 90% of the good. And now you can't figure out why nobody wants to be a policeman or serve in the military. You haven't sold them on the American dream or what patriotism is. But no, I think the country's going to be fine. And we peaks and valleys. We're just coming out of a valley.
Awesome. All right. Oh, we've got time for one more?
Last question, then we'll wrap up with a little video preview of the project that they're working on about the Green Berets, and then we will wrap up for the night. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Recruiting.
Yeah.
Finally starting to come out of the basement. Can you give us an idea of what happened over the last 4 years and what you anticipate for the next 4?
Well, so there's two big ones, right? The experimental vaccine and transgenders in the military, and however you feel about it, trans soldiers didn't have to deploy and they were treated special, and so why would you want to do twice the work so somebody can experiment with their sexuality? And it's supposed to be an elite thing, and it's supposed to be a service. It's not a welfare program. It's the military. And so when we started doing these social experimentizing, when the military took a political stance and said the COVID vaccine is the best thing that ever happened and we have to have it, even though everyone in the military is absolutely not in the demographic that even remotely needed it, you soured a bunch of people on it. And you add that into the fact of a humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan, people weren't pumped about the military. Those things are all gone, and there's a deeper meaning. I had to serve through all that, and I got the COVID vaccine, and they were like, why? And I was like, well, sometimes you have to walk point. I don't think this is a great idea, but I promised my country that I would serve and I would be this person, so I'm getting this vaccine even though I disagree with it. So I did. But those were all struggles, and also the wars lasted a long time. We had a really big chunk of older service members that had been doing multiple deployments over and over and over again. So when the war ended, they were like, my watch is over, and I'm out of here. So you got bad messaging, and then a big chunk of people leaving the military. But I still toot around in there. If I had a choice to get a younger man's body and go back in, I'd sign back up today. It's the media always makes everything just look 10 times as bad, and really the only people that really want to talk to you about something sternly is a service member that had a bad experience. And so that's the loudest voices you hear, is everything that's wrong with it. The military is doing really great. We had a hiccup in it, but you can't kill an institution like that in 4 years.
In 1942, during World War II, an elite command force known as the Devil's Brigade was formed. This unit engaged in elite psychological and guerrilla tactics known as unconventional warfare. Today, unconventional warfare is practiced by the United States Special Forces, otherwise known as the Green Berets.
Green Berets have existed throughout time. The first recorded special operation was by the Spartans, and they snuck behind enemy lines and killed a king, turned the tide of the battle. Those guys were Green Berets. There just wasn't a Green Beret to put on them yet.
You would engage with the enemy, kill him, have your fellow brothers be killed by him, go to his village, help his mother with medical needs, and then on the way out, recruit his brother to work for you.
It's not just one thing that they do. It's not just the sexy stuff. That's not everything. They have to transition from that to another mission. That's a mental skill.
If you think you know Green Berets, unless you know one, you don't.
Now, for the first time, viewers will go alongside the Green Berets and learn the art of unconventional warfare.
Three components of unconventional warfare are underground, auxiliary,
I'm asking them to confirm or deny if that's them.
and a guerrilla force.
With first-hand accounts and stories drawn from over 15,000 Special Forces veterans, each episode will teach a principle of unconventional warfare.
I pulled my pistol out and just started advancing on the nearest group of fighters, engaging them as best I could, which my best was better than their best. I was able to not only suppress them, but wound several of them, close the distance, and was pretty much out of pistol ammunition. And my rifle was jammed, so the next best thing I could think of was to throw a hand grenade up in the air, and that got everybody excited, so they all ran off while I got my rifle back in the fight.
With the tactics of war constantly evolving,
So when you're looking at the Ghost Army, our lineage does link back to that.
we learn how unconventional warfare will continue to shape history.
In the front line, Cywar works against the enemy's morale to make him suspicious of his officers.
And the unique ways of intelligence gathering.
We hit a house and we saw several women that looked beaten and looked like they wanted our help. And what we realized was that these Afghan women would literally be able to turn on their husbands to provide us information to not only protect their own country, but to alleviate their husbands from being able to take advantage of them or beat them or do things in retribution against the Taliban and against the husbands that are treating them poorly. And from that, the Angry Wives Club was born.
With exclusive access to one of the most elite groups in the United States Special Forces. We bring you the art of unconventional war, the Green Berets.
So Ryan, when can people see this, and how do they watch it when it comes out?
Hopefully, end of the year. We're working on our pilot episode right now. Earl's been great. It helps. Medal of Honor really helps. He picks up, as he mentioned, he called President Biden. So he just, anytime I get stuck in the bureaucracy, he calls up the generals and says, make this happen. So no, we really wanted to do something. My dad served in the Air Force. Was a B-52 bomber in Vietnam. And I never served myself, but always wanted to give back and find a way to support the military. And recruitment has been down, and so I thought, a lot of it is branding. And also, I met my first Green Beret, and I thought, wow, I don't actually know what Green Berets do, which is by design. The quiet professionals, which interestingly, they make the worst interviews at first, because you're like, can I get you a hero shot, which is a normal, just front shot? And I'm not a hero, sir. And I was like, no, this is just for the... And then I learned, if you're like, oh, Earl, but hey, tell about the story. It's like, it wasn't that big a deal. I was like, fine, Earl, tell me why Tony is so great. And they go, oh, Tony's amazing. And so we wanted to do a show that documented actually what they do and how they bring this cerebral approach to engaging in warfare. So it's interrogation resistance and escape and evasion, body language, close quarter combats, just the planning that these ODAs go through is incredible. And the SEALs get all the movies. And so we wanted to give the Green Berets something. So each episode, hopefully, I wanted something that you could take home, no matter what your vocation is. You go, you know what, I could take some of that unconventional special forces training, and I could apply it to my lemonade stand, my school, my aircraft carrier, whatever God's called you to work on. So we're hopeful it'll be out to end of the year. But thanks for having us.
Awesome. And on behalf of the foundation, it is truly an honor and a pleasure to have Master Sergeant Plumley here today. So join me in thanking him for his service and also for being here tonight.
Yeah.
And thank you all for being here. Stay tuned with the Herzog Foundation. We will have another great speaker, hopefully towards the end of May. Some more information will be coming out about that soon. But thank you for being here, and everyone have a good night.